Hello, everyone. Good day. Um, just a little sound check. Everybody hear me well enough? My voice coming through good? Yeah, good. Okay, well, let's start class with our meditation for today. And I'll invite you off to take a comfortable seated position and begin towards closing your eyes. Just take a moment. Take a moment to just sense what it is to transition, kind of change or shift from where you were before to where you are now. Oftentimes in our days, it seems like one block. It's hard to separate moments that we were particularly aware of what was different: sounds, smells, tastes, sights. But when we close our eyes with an intention also of going inward, there's a distinct change, something that's we may not remember at the end of the day, but strikes a big difference because it's not what our five senses are used to. We're now turning inward. So just recognize that transition. See if at this moment how that feels, perhaps compared to other times. This is a great exercise to do. Eyes and just being like, okay, I'm meditating now. Just making that simple shift and just seeing, is it abrupt? Are we reaching outward? Do our senses want? Are they grasping outward? Or are they okay with just turning inward? Maybe even they're grasping for some time of rest. So just get a sense of where you are with that spectrum from really wanting to be outward or really wanting to be inward or just neutral about it. Easy transition. Often that's noticeable with the breath. Our breath may be quick just because we're racing to sit down or our mind was churning, or perhaps the breath quickly spiked and sped up because of this transition. And just observing how long it takes to just accept the current situation, that my eyes are closed and I've transitioned. Is it easy for the breath to settle? The body to start letting go of any posturing that it may be performing from our last task. Just allowing yourself to be with your breath, perhaps a general awareness of your body. You take a quick scan through the body, riding your awareness with the breath. See if there's an area that you notice is perhaps most striking in its posture or the way that it's set up or its holding pattern at this moment. Maybe it's your shoulders, neck and head, maybe chest, maybe your lower back. Could be anywhere. And just be present with that. Don't try to change it or move at this moment, but just see, what is this posture? What was your body trying to support you doing? And after a moment of inquiry, perhaps just take some time to breathe towards that area or into it if it happens to be your torso. Just see if it continues to want to hold, or perhaps your mind and the body have connected. And it's like, oh, something different we're doing now. I can relax, or I can restabilize in a different way, different posture. So take some breaths to be with any areas of your body that may be contracted or kind of chronically positioned in certain ways. Breathe into them, bring awareness there. As you're settling, responding to this invitation, presence of embodiment, I invite you to keep that presence throughout our talk today. And after about another 2 or 3 breaths, I'll invite you to open your eyes and come back into the space. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Good. So today's class, we're going to diverge a little from what we've been doing with herbology. Decided to kind of throw in a class a different subject just to mix it up a little. And then actually, the following week's class, we're gonna go back to herbology. Also wanted to give you a little time to catch up with monographs and things like that. It's wonderful. I've been really enjoying looking over what everyone's putting in there. My vision is that over time, we'll refine the process. Most immediately, you all are hopefully benefiting from that. It's like as a team, you're doing work for each other. So now you have these great monographs you can print out, you can put in a booklet, and you have eventually you'll have your like 20 herbs and formulas just right there, easy access, which is a great thing. Instead of carrying like 5 books around or things like that, or to refer, right? You can compile them into one source. In the future, hopefully, we'll probably just have a standard template. I'm probably going to choose, one of your brilliant inventions of templates to use in the future for like Yoga Veda and other courses. But I really want to commend you. There's some really lovely things that you all have been doing. I've been really enjoying it. So this week, we're going to be talking about really kind of 2 subjects in one, but they happen to float together well. One is most practically the chapter on Dr. Law's chapter on Tanmatra Chikitsa, okay, in the 3rd book. So we're going to be kind of covering that. And along with that, the concept of sadrita, which is kind of moral conduct or healthy ways of being for psychology, right, for our mind, right? I just want to plug something just quickly before we begin is I happen to have a desire to listen to a podcast yesterday, and I was like, I want to search for something new. I want to see what Ayurvedic podcasts are out there. I don't know if any of you have also done something like that. I'd be like, hey, there's a couple good ones out there. I happen to go to John Douliard's one, who's really heavy into mixing Ayurveda with the science, which I appreciate. I like that. But he did an interview with Dr. Frawley which, golly, I wish he had a podcast weekly. He's brilliant. But in this podcast, and why it's relevant to this class is it was about Ayurvedic psychology, and it's based off his brand new book that he put out there, like Vedic Counseling. And it's fantastic. It's the interview is so useful to students of Ayurveda. He's continuously, some of the Dr. Frawley is just keeping that in mind, and he is given us so many good tools of how to approach shifting someone that is in a more tamasic or rajasic phase towards a sattvic phase, but in very practical terms of like, here's how you do it. You increase the frequency of appointments, you do this, you do that, it's like, it's brilliant. It's filled with so many wonderful tools. So I would definitely suggest that. It's a brand new podcast, I think, in the last few weeks that Duliar put out. It's like an hour talk. I'm not even finished with it, but I was enjoying it. But it directly corresponds to the subject that we're speaking about, right? It kind of puts it into action well. So with today's subject, the reason I coupled them together is essentially our mental, emotional health is pretty much based on our choices of what we do with our senses, right? Or whether it's our choice or not, what our senses convey to us, but ultimately how we respond to sensory input. All right. So with this being said, we're going into a subject that is huge in the sense that on one spectrum, we're talking about karmas, and on the other spectrum, we're talking about a lot of free will choice and things to do, right? So it's basically like, how do we respond, and what therapies can target certain ways and channels or sensory organs and senses that have been overused, misused, underused, so that we can start healing. But with the subject of Tanmatra Chikitsa, with the 5 sense therapies, it opens our door hugely to what we can do under the scope of Ayurveda, right? So that kind of goes into what I want to kind of open the question and answers this week. Of course, we're open to whatever you want to ask, but in our homework, our workbook for this class, I asked you a couple questions. First of all, what 5 sense therapies have you experienced? And, just kind of explain them Ayurvedically. And also, any therapies you're interested in integrating with Ayurveda that would apply to one of the 5 senses, which is a big, broad field of life experience, right? And also talk about, is there one sense, if not more, that you chronically misuse, overuse, or underuse, let's say? Okay, so those are kind of the workbook questions I had you do. So I'm kind of curious to hear some responses from that. Okay, so I'll open up with question and answer. If you wait too long, I'm going to start having subtle fears that you didn't do the workbook.
I often recommend the people I've been recommending. I always add in the end things like essential oil therapies, things that they can use, whether it's for the bath or whether it's for diffusion or whether it's to take it.
Wonderful.
That and color also. Color therapies, things they could possibly wear or have in front of them or meditate on.
Great. Yeah. So fire element, sight, as well as earth element, smell. Right. Great. Yeah. Great adjunct therapies.
And crystals also. I recommend different crystals.
Yeah. Chromotherapy, color therapy. That falls in that sphere. Totally. Great. Wonderful. How about others?
For me, the ones that I have mostly used on myself are the mantras, the crystals, and aromas really affect my mood as well. So those things are the ones that I feel like I have the most realm in. And sometimes just a singing bowl can affect me healing.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the ones that I feel like I have the most. The most abused for me, probably taste.
Yeah.
For me, it's, yeah, I'll either eat something I know I shouldn't because I love the taste of it, or maybe I'll eat too much of something because it's just so good.
Yeah, sure, sure. Now, two questions I want to take out from what some of you shared already is, well, one, do you find that the things that you like, aromas and sun is because maybe you happen to learn that way? Like being a kind of a teacher for many, many years, I did a lot of work with learning styles. But learning styles have a lot to do with the five senses and which one you predominate with, if you're a visual person, if you're an auditory person, right? But you know what? It doesn't exclude taste and smell, right? It really doesn't. You can learn that way too and remember things that way too. So that's where aromatherapy really speaks and comes in. So that's one thing to think about. And think about with your clients and yourself. It's useful information because we tend to choose the things that we're kind of apt to have a proclivity for. And then the next thing is with that question about misuse, underuse of senses. Now, taste is probably the most easy one that we can all go to, but did that also start opening up a little door, be like, wait a minute, what about my other senses? You know, for instance, when I was younger, I never found that I had too much to do beyond the normal realms of just having sugar cereals when I was growing up and all that would taste. But I was really into horror movies when I was a teenager. Right? I just loved it. I mean, that's a little bit of aggressive use of the site. It's like too much input there, right? But if we look through our lives, if it's not current, but maybe we had periods of really overusing our senses in certain ways. I also went to like really intense, fast-paced music, really loud, so my ears too. You know? So if you look through your life, you'll find phases, if not current but past, that there was times that it wasn't just one sense, but it was overuse of many, if not all, or underuse of that, right? So anyway, so go ahead and go on with that. I just want to surf off of what you were speaking of.
I actually have a question. Just for
Your reception is really bad. We can't hear it. Staticky.
Is it better?
I'm not sure if your headset's plugged in or if it's picking up. It sounds like your computer's picking it. Yeah. While Rafael goes ahead and there, Rafael, I'm going to go ahead and just have someone else do and you play with that. Okay. Yeah.
I can ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Regarding the overuse of senses, like what if this particular sense isn't working too well, then would it be overusing? Would it be a good training? For example, I don't have that great sense of smell, but I love smell. So that's why I do use essential oils and aromatherapy. But I mean, I even travel with my travel diffuser.
Sure, yeah.
Everything, and I'm always having it around me, but I'm not necessarily smelling it all the time because my sense of smell is less.
Yeah. And so that there could be physical reasons for that, of course. I don't know exactly what the history is. Some people, and there could be nervous system reasons for that. I have some clients that just can't smell because they have nerve damage to there, so that's one thing. And then I had a client recently that had severe chemical sensitivities for working in chemical factories for a good portion of his life. And then in the last 3 weeks with herbs, he's beginning to smell again. And most importantly, he's beginning to smell and not being bothered by things like diesel fumes and other things. He's like, oh my God, I'm getting desensitized, but it's more a healthy ability to respond instead of being, oversensitized to that, right? So things can happen, things can change over time and with remedies that you have. But if you're still able to smell, hence you're using essential oil. So just kind of keep up with that, but also be careful because if your senses are diminished and you're unaware, you could be doing too much. I know many people that overuse essential oils, and essential oils, whether you're breathing in, put it on the body, there's only a limit that you can have per day before your liver really gets taxed. They're powerful, right? Scents are very, very powerful, and we have to acknowledge that if we put it on our skin, that's going right into our bloodstream. Then it has to be filtered by liver and spleen, and there's only a certain capacity before it gets overloaded. Right. And I know people that have their kit and huff essential oils like all day long. It's not a good thing. Right? So just be gentle. Try to wean yourself down to keep it very subtle, dilute them, and see, and that will make your sense much more responsive than doing it all the time, right?
I just wanted to share something. I have a bad internet. I won't cut out. I'm doing some research right now on this idea that people who have chronic fatigue syndrome and multiple chemical sensitivity and a related fibromyalgia, now I definitely have biological things that are contributing to my illness, but I knew that my nervous system was like way overtuned, like it was just because of the trauma. And the idea behind this particular way of healing the overtuning of the nervous system is the idea that the actual limbic system and the amygdala end up having too much negative input, and it makes it so that you're constantly in fight or flight mode, and so the nervous system will overreact to sounds, smells. You'll actually be hypersensitive. So this is the theory behind why some people get multiple chemical sensitivity. Or your client who had the issue with the smell, where now he can smell things without being overwhelmed. And so they have these processes, some of which are very much based on yoga, about how to calm the amygdala down, calm the limbic system down, tell your body you're safe and that you don't have to overreact to every single stimulus that comes in. And it actually helps a lot of people. So
absolutely. That's the way, is to deprogram. Neuroscience has given us a lot of great tools. Well, just affirming what we know through yoga. There's a way of toning down and making our body accept that it's safe. So if you look at and this I think, thanks for bringing up, Stephanie, because it's like 5 sense therapies really speak about that, about how all our senses kind of go into a central computer. If it's overloaded by any and all or many of them, it'll then give up defense mechanisms or protective mechanisms, actually. So hypersensitivity is a protective mechanism. It's a form of like PTSD, more or less, of our nervous system, right? Being like, no, we can't take it. I'm way too sensitive. Bring me into seclusion. Give me a safe space. Yeah. The opposite can be true too, is maybe you've too sheltered yourself, overprotected, and thus you need to go out and experience, but in a positive way, not in negative things. Like go out in nature and experience sounds, tastes, smells, and things like that. Yeah. So, Rafaela, have you fixed the issue?
I don't know. Is it better?
Not so much, but I can hear you, so let's give it a shot.
Okay. Yes, I forgot the question. The question I had was when you mentioned the change into the sound you were talking about, you liked the really loud sound. Can we see these changes also due to the phases in life of a dosha that is dominating? Because when you're younger, you like louder music, while when you're older, at the stage, you want more calmer environment.
Yeah. I think I get the gist. There's a lot that I lost in there, but I think I get the gist of your question. So basically, just to reiterate, make sure I got you. Like when let's say, for instance, when you're younger, you may have been into like more intense, like music, let's say, or senses, stimulation kind of. And when you're older, you're kind of there. Well, it depends, is chances are, which is probably likely in a lot of our cases, right? When we're young, we weren't exposed to things that allowed us to refine and self-reflect on our senses. So we're just going like stimulate, right? And we had a lot of energy to go with that and express that. And then, we probably hit a point that we were overstimulated and maybe even crashed from it, or it was just too much. Or then, we found stimulation in other areas of lives. So the grand sum total was plenty, right? I.e. like having a kid. It's like, you don't need to listen to punk rock anymore, right? It's like that goes on in your house nonstop, right? So you know, we can either, it's a self-regulatory mechanism, or, you know, also when you have vata being stimulated doshically already, you know, then it could be like overloaded. You just can't take it. You have this natural way of like, I need to balance myself by calming down, right? If the body wisdom is there. You know, everyone in this classroom has obviously stepped over the portal of going into self-reflection and self-awareness, right? If I was teaching to just the general public and they had no choice but to listen, you know, it'd be a little difficult because a lot of them would still be caught up in that rajasic kind of like, but that's what I live on. You know, I had my 10 cups of coffee and, you know, I love the intense music and going out and dancing and stuff like that, right? And that's nothing wrong, but it's just like a lot of us have probably, you know, self-reflected, being like, is that what I really want? You know, is that actually nourishing me? You know, and again, it's, you know, the danger, of course, is a lot of us that get into the really self-reflective start cutting off and actually underusing the senses, right? As opposed to really experiencing things and gaining a good resilience in life. You know, if one can become kind of quote unquote over sattvic in a way of like start making judgments on things that are outside that aren't really negative, you know, that aren't good or bad, they just are, right? So we have to be careful, you know, so find that balance. You know, I often recommend very frequently to clients, go out and dance, go and have fun. You know, do something that's stimulating and fun, because your rasa is really low and it really needs some enjoyment, some fun, laughter, dancing, you know, enjoying yourself, right? And because that they've kind of so insulated, just so worried about their health, this and this and this, and it works. And it works very, very well. So finding that right line, you know, I think as we get older, we have a little more vested interest into finding that balance for ourselves. But we could also get a little scared and overprotective. Right? Did that, I'm hoping that I addressed your question well. Okay. Yeah, Natalie, go ahead.
I like to ask my clients on their questionnaire which situations, which environments bring them comfort. So heat, cold, touch. And then when I have conversation with them, I often ask them, how often do you use these senses? So if touch brings you pleasure, how often do you massage yourself? Or how often do you go for a massage? And they're like, I never really thought about that before. And so it kind of brings an awareness to what do I like? What feels good to me? And I find that's very empowering for people to start using, oh, I do like smells. I will look into essential oils. And then they discover something new. And it works really well.
Yeah, great. Do we have permission to steal that from you? I definitely want to put that on my. That's a great question. That's a lovely question.
So
yeah,
I asked them first which conditions irritate you, and then I asked them the same question, but which conditions hurt you, and then we have a discussion about that.
Excellent. Yeah, beautiful. So great. This is, I recommend everybody put that on their forms, because I hope to next time I revise it. But yeah, that's a beautiful question asked during intake. You know, like which of your senses do you find a lot of pleasure in, or comfort in, or you tend to go in? Which ones do you find most discomfort in, you know, most annoy you? Like, oh, I often smell things I don't like, you know, or that. That also gives us a lot of insights to what elements may be out of balance. Right, overstimulated, understimulated, as well as you know, doshas, because the elements relate to the doshas, right? So that's a great question, very great question.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I wanna share. On that note that you said about dancing, there was like this period in my life where I was like a workaholic. I worked really hard, and I think what saved me was dance, because every weekend I would go and dance, and I knew that if I didn't go dancing, I was gonna feel terrible. Like, and every so often because I'm not in that como stress, very evident stress situation right now, but then I forget dancing, like, and there's periods of my life where I feel like, oh, I really need to dance, because, and it was not only just going out dancing, but it really, for me, that I had some like issues with my body and acceptance. Like I felt that I worked through that it was a therapy. Like I keep
Yeah.
saying it was a therapy for me, dancing.
Yeah. Well, I just want to acknowledge that is in my experience clinically is often it's not the herbs, not all this other stuff that seems like the obvious way to go, but it's those things that recognizing and finding what really stimulates your rasa, what really nourishes you of that five sense therapies, or many of them sometimes, but sometimes just one thing. And that can make the world of difference or open the door to tremendous healing, right? So the questions like we've been asking, and like Natalie brought up, is great. It's like if you can get inside that door, I mean, really, don't all of us have a preferred way through one of the senses? I know for me, music really helps me. Sound, music, I love it. I don't do nearly enough, but I wish I could have a side lifestyle of being a musician, kirtan wala or so, because it would nourish me so much, and it did in the past, right? Um, and I think all of us probably have that. Some people love to cook. I also have that too. I get nourished by making really good meals. So taste is a very helpful one too. Even my herbs, even if they're bitter, I love taste. I love to experience taste, right? I'm a complete foodie. It's crazy, but I just am. I love variety and all this stuff. So all of us, I think, have that, right? It's sense, maybe smells, maybe sight. You're an artist, you love like beautiful settings and so on like that. My wife's more like that. She has such a visual sense and smell sense. Those are senses that really do it for her. So we all have that. Everyone has a proclivity. Let me go into the subject matter. Let's say we have one more like pressing question there. Okay. So I want to start off to just kind of remind us that one of the key of the three big reasons who are causes of imbalance, one of them is improper under and overuse of the five senses. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind, and this is directly related, of course, to both kind of mental, emotional health, psychology, as well as the Chanmacha Chikitsa, the therapies we use for that. And like I said, the Sattvika, like bringing the kind of right conduct concepts from Ayurveda, Vedic kind of lifestyle, as well as Tanmacha Chikitsa really do go together. Because yes, you could try to treat it just with herbs or just one route, which would be, of course, taste, but if you do all the senses and you recognize which ones are problematic, you're going to be much more successful. Because no one gets into mental, emotional problems without the senses being somehow involved. All right, so it's almost always a very important causative factor. So let's start out with Shabda. And the way I like to go about this is by no means can I cover every possibility here. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that Dr. Lutz talked in the book, and we can, add some pieces to that. But Shabda, so Shabda is sound. And this relates to the ether element in Ayurveda, right? And kind of indirectly with Vata dosha. Now, some of the key things are mentioned like in the book under Shabda are speech therapy, right? That's an obvious kind of correlation. Counseling, music therapy, mantra, right? So, and you can't really necessarily separate these into completely individual fields. They all totally overlap as part of sound therapy, right? Through our sense door of hearing. So speech therapy, if people actually have issues with speaking, and not only, like literally like lisps and all this stuff, but also expressing themselves, right? Or over-expressing or under-expressing themselves. That's a very important thing to look at. And we can assess, is that an underuse of senses, an overuse of senses, or a misuse? They just have, really a difficulty. I'm going to use a little bit of a crude example, kind of for more of a joke for this, but I have a friend who's he's a Brazilian guy who we always joke about. We say he has Brazilian Tourette's in the sense that he has no barrier to what he says to people sometimes, and it can be very shocking, right? But this you know, jokingly, but on a serious note too, is he gets into a lot of problems with this, having this like zero like level of self-consciousness of saying things. It can be really beautiful sometimes because he can just go right from his heart to his mouth and express the truth that's really there and really help people see. But sometimes it's a little shocking, right? It's like too much. Like, no, it's not what you want to say. Or if he's off with it, it could be really bad, right? So there we have kind of this misuse or overflow of the senses that's happening there, right? Just as an example. So what's often used, and Dr. Lad mentions, is, you know, pranayam is extremely good with this, right? With this sense of hearing to help one gain greater consciousness of speech, whether it's a physical speech disorder all the way to being self-conscious of what you're saying and how you are expressing, right? Herbs, of course, can help. Meditation can help. Manual therapies can help. So there's a lot of things. So bringing the sense of sound, shabda, we have to think about the two main organs, right? The organ of expression and organ receiving. So they are ear and our mouth, right? So if you look at Dinacharya, right, we also have like oil in the ear, and then we have Kabbalah oil pulling, right? You know, those are all helpful, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can do to work with. Now, counseling falls into that too, because someone who is very self-aware and can help you become more self-aware of your consciousness through speech therapy, through talking. And this, you know, counseling is a huge field. It could just be your best friend. By you sharing your best friend, you know, and them just listening. And Dr. Ladd plays very importantly on the concept of active listening, like being a good listener. That is so healing. I mean, kind of raise your hand, you know, it's like, isn't that wonderful if someone really listens to you and gives you the time of day? Just by doing that, you know, so that's a skill that us as practitioners and healers, we really benefit if we can actually just hear someone or know when to click into just being present and listening for them instead of like, oh, let's give you suggestions and all this, right? Try to be a fixer, let's say, to more to letting the person express, right? So counseling, you know, we could go on more and more. There's so much to go in that realm, but that's a very important thing. Active listening, but also speaking in a way that is soothing or that kind of gets to where the person can really understand. Right? Music therapy falls into this, right? And that's a whole field in itself, right? And it's a lot of research been done on that. If we look into Vedic concepts of that, the concept of raga, right? Real classic Indian music, if properly, you know, done, if traditionally done, they don't play hit songs. Right? If you go to, you know, a real true like Indian musician, they're not going to be like, oh, you know, I got famous on, you know, this cassette that went throughout the world playing, you know, Raga Malkans or something. So I'm going to play that for all of you tonight. You know, that's not necessarily, that wouldn't be really true raga. What an Indian musician, properly trained, will notice. First of all, where are they? Their desha, their environment. Then, what time of day is it? Right? Is it morning? In India, they have music 24 hours a day, so there's no like evening music concerts. It's all over the place. Right? 3 a.m. Right? So, time of day, and then who's here? All those factors come into choosing the scale of the song they're going to play. Right? So their particular scale of the notes will be based on those factors. And what season? Is it rainy season? Is it an afternoon time? Where am I and who am I going? You know, who am I speaking to? That has a vibration and I'm going to play the song of that vibration, right? Amazing, right? Very, very particular and healing. And of course, you know, somebody may be exposed to so many different things with music therapy, but in basic, you know, Ayurveda speaks about, like, if we look at Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and I think going back to your question, kind of Rafaela, too, you know, it's sort of like, if we have a Vata imbalance, then generally, like, very soothing music, like music that can be more like steady, not too much variance, will help kind of vata calm down. For pitta, more like strings and with a bit of like variety, intricacy, but maybe based on a very steady theme, right? Maybe a little bit expansive though too, to kind of diffuse that sharpness of pitta. And for kapha, yeah, hard rock. It's like, get it moving. Got to move it and shake it, kind of. Let's say, right? So those are just some basics. We can go into much more detail, but that's just some basics of that. But it's useful, like in your clinic, or like today, for instance, I'm doing abhyanga with someone. I'm probably going to first of all check out what their imbalance is and kind of put music that corresponds with that. Right? Then we go into the field of mantra, right? And now we're crossing over to like yogic methods. So we could do a lot with that. We could go into bijas of the elements, into the chakras, the bija mantras for the chakras. The organs have their own bijas, right? Which page is that? I think it's page 259 in your books has the bija chart. Yeah, Heidi, go ahead.
Will you, I know the sounds of the 7 major ones, but would you mind going through the chart on 259 and pronouncing some of those?
Okay, so the ones for the organs?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So let's choose. Well, how about you ask me some questions about the ones that are hard for you, because just time-wise.
The ones for the ovaries and fallopian tube?
Yeah, sure. So beam, and Dr. Lott speaks about also too to extend the M. So beam. So visualizing where and doing that. I've actually used that with a client to huge success that had issues with reproductive system artava.
Do you make them chant it, or do you play them?
Yeah. I often show them what it is, and then have them chant it, and give them like a routine to do it like 7 times or 108 times. She did it with a mala.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever have issues with prescribing that kind of stuff? I mean, people might get freaked out, or.
Well, it's good to be mindful, right, of who they are. But if someone's coming in there that's doing mantra, all into yoga and having they're all ready for it, right? They love it. But yeah, definitely, it wouldn't really fit necessarily with someone that's not. And Dr. Lott kind of puts that out too in here, is that going to the subject of in general, I mean, I was about to kind of just finish off with that, organs, planets. If you're into Vedic astrology, planets have certain mantras and so on, and then just in general Sanskrit. Let's talk why.
Sorry, can you just do the one for this?
Once Heidi, let's keep going with you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to know the pronunciation for the one for the spleen and the liver too.
Okay, yeah. So spleen is hram, and liver chrum. I've also seen liver be chrim, but that's also eyes, like you see that. But liver and eyes are connected. So chrim or chrum. Oh, it'll be fun to go into Sanskrit with you all too. Yeah.
Because we have a lot of Christians in this country. If you want to give a Christian something to chant, give them Hallelujah or Shalom. Those are great. All those seed vowels and things.
Absolutely. So to kind of cover that subject, there's something about Sanskrit that is important to know, as well as a lot of old languages, is some languages, I would say all languages come from this philosophy, but some of them have deviated from it because it wasn't implicit, or they haven't stuck with that consciousness of their origination. And some languages weren't like early primary languages. They're derived off of others, right? So the earlier primary languages, like early ancient languages, a lot of them, and Sanskrit in particular, it's like we know that this was very intentional, was that the sounds were created not just randomly. It wasn't just like, oh, there's a rock, so we'll call it rock. They were feeling the sound vibration. They were attuning with the substance and listening to it. And thus they made a sound vibration, the way that they can mimic its vibratory frequency and thus express the sound. So in Sanskrit, the sound is connected to the vibration of the object, right? not only that, but that's also like a combination of elements and a combination of things. So Sanskrit vowels, as well as the consonants, were based off of things that were going on in the body, sounds that could be made by the body, right? So it's very profound. If you just read this section of the book, Dr. Lai goes into huge detail about like, okay, you know, these gutturals, these particular consonants, the labials, the different types of things, all have a connection with different elements, and it makes a lot of sense. It's amazing, right? So, for instance, just chanting the Sanskrit alphabet, Dr. Ladd speaks about, goes through the entire body and the chakras and helps out every organ, everything. You know, just doing the alphabet. And then mantras are like certain formulas to help correct imbalances, particular imbalances in that. That's essentially behind the concept of science of mantra. Now, does Hebrew, does other old languages based off of that? I would say, yeah. You know, I think that there is a lot of that similar wisdom to a greater or lesser extent, or I should say only lesser, I would say, because people haven't kept up with that kind of consciousness and energy with it, but it's there, right? So, and really any kind of prayers that you see in these old languages and so on are intended like that. So if you're working with Christian, Muslim, the Jewish people, you name it, just whatever culture, surely find what it is in their system. And really, the most important thing is not the pronunciation necessarily. It's the intention and not knowledge. Right? I always joke that if Sanskrit only worked if you pronounced it right, then pretty much no guru would ever have gained enlightenment. And forget the Tibetans; they're really out. You know, no luck there. You know, they can't even say "Om Mani Padme Hum" correctly. You know, it's like so. Has nothing to do with necessarily being good with the pronunciation. It may help if you feel it does, but it's not necessary, right? Because we have millions of examples of people getting benefit by completely mispronouncing things, right? And like again, like it's even like the Indian culture is like, you know, I always joke about like, you know, Neem Karoli Baba, he had this saying that if you just say Ram's name correctly once, then he'll appear to you. But he wasn't saying if you actually pronounce the Sanskrit correctly, because he never did. If you listen to him, he's like, rah, 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 you know, it's like it's nothing to do with that, right? And the Tibetans are a great example. Use Om Mani Padme Hum, or you know, all variations of that. With their language, it just sounds a little different. It's never going to sound like Sanskrit. Right? It's just a thing, but it doesn't exclude them from the benefit of that mantra by any means, right? I think they brought it to the highest level, right? So it's very, very important, you know. But yet at the same time, if you have the intention, the understanding, the faith, the belief, that's what empowers the mantra, right? So if you're giving someone a mantra and they're like, this is weird, it's not going to work as well, right? Than if you give them something that they're comfortable and familiar with, right? So oftentimes I just have people create English affirmations for that. You know, and there's plenty of research that backs that too, affirmation and how it works. So that's the field of sound. There's much more in there, right? You know, we could go on with things, but you have infinite, anything that makes a sound can be used as a tool if we can fit it into and understand it with the perspective of Ayurveda. And it all comes down to gunas, right? You know, it's like what kind of guna does the sound make will have an appropriate effect on those doshas and the balancing. Sparsha. So let's talk about sparsha. So touch. So under touch, there's tremendous amount of information, right? And a tremendous amount. First of all, just getting to the basics is under, over, and misuse of touch. That's a huge thing, right? A lot of people suffer from under touch, right? They're alone, they're lonely, they don't get touched enough, they don't touch themselves. And that can be a big problem. They've done enough studies to understand that humans need that for growth and development when you're young, for instance, or a child or a baby, all the way to, you know, any age. You know, we need touch. And as well as over touch, too much touch can be a problem, right? It can oversensitize, as well as misuse of touch, abuse, etc., physical abuse. That's a gross example of that. Right? So that's a very, very important thing to consider. Now, touch with mindfulness. So let's go into like therapeutic use of touch. Massage, for instance, polarity therapy, marma, doing lepana or kind of plasters, medical plasters, Reiki, distance healing touch, mudra, self kind of imposed touch. Like these all fall under the field of touch therapies. But one thing to understand that's very, very important, kind of the same concept as sound therapy, is what enlivens this, and Dr. Ladd called it dhyana sparsha. Meditative awareness when giving the touch is of utmost importance. So there's a very big difference if you just kind of like, I'm going to do some acupressure, and you're like watching TV or something like that. Two, I am sending chi and I'm being present. I'm being present with my thumb. I'm feeling the tissues connect, right? Very big difference of that. I'm going to use an example, kind of more romantic example. I think we all know when someone's not really present when you get a kiss, right? And then when someone is really in love with you and is kissing you, it's a very different experience, right? Right? It's like, I think that's a gross example I think we can all relate to. It's like, you can tell a lot. It's the same thing, but you feel a whole different experience that flushes you with oxytocin or this and this. You get all this different experience from it. So the same is with body work. If you are touching someone with intention of love, intention of healing, it does a whole different experience for their inner pharmacy than if one is being unconscious with it. Right? So that is of utmost importance. That's also behind how one works with acupuncture, acupressure, all these things, marma therapy, is you just can't, stick a needle in and just go away. Your chi is being directed through the needle. It's just a tool, right? It's not the physical needle going in. It's your chi, your energy that's working with that, interacting with theirs. Same as pulse assessment. You're not just doing this, putting my hand there and getting this. Your prana is going into their body and traveling through this. Right? So intention is utmost important. Right? Very, very important concept to keep there. So that's one thing. The gunas of touch are very important, right? We all know that touch gives us a lot of information. It translates the gunas of the person touching to the person's body. And as a therapist, you're feeling for the gunas in what you're doing, right? So there's that interaction. On a practical note, we have the upadhatu of rasa is the top layer of the skin, and then the 6 layers underneath that fall into like mamsa dhatu, right? Or really, it could be related to all 7 dhatus, and Dr. Ladd kind of mentions that in the book. But where that's very important is you got rasa, which is how we communicate and feel emotions, right? As well as mamsa, which is how we hold things and hold ourselves in the body and move and express ourselves. So these layers of our psychophysiology are being worked upon through sparsa, through touch therapies, right? And taking that another step deeper here is emotions, especially like repressed, unfelt, unprocessed emotions, get stuck in our tissues, namely our connective tissue fascia and neuromuscular junctions, neuromuscular cleft being, again, part of Majja Vahashrotas. That's the exit for that, right? But modern science is finding that to be true. This is where like neuropeptides get stuck and peptides and all this stuff, all this science, they're finding that these things get stuck in tissues and can be released by, manual therapies of all sorts, acupuncture, Reiki, even all these things can release that from our tissues. How many of you experienced like having a massage and maybe not outwardly, but inwardly you had emotions come up, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have massage. It could be any gamut of therapies or touch, or it could just be a friend putting a hand on you, right? So it's powerful. Now, what in Ayurveda, what subdoshas are related to the skin and with touch therapy? Like, what are we thinking of? But one from each dosha as subdosha is very, very important here. I couldn't hear you, Carla, but I saw your mouth.
Pita, Manjaka Pita?
Brajaka pizza. Brajaka. Yeah.
Raj-
Yeah, Brajaka. So this is what translates that touch into a good feeling, bad feeling, whatever, right? Brajaka pita, very important, right? How about kapha and how about vata? I mean, vata, almost all of them do, but when we're thinking about like a massage or physical touch,
Vyana Vata?
Vyana, yeah, absolutely. Vyana, circulation, right? That information is getting circulated, right? And then for kapha, we have shleshaka, right? That, especially in the joints and kind of those spaces in between, interconnected, we have shleshaka kapha. So those are like the three subdoshas that are really worked upon here, and they're powerful, right? Another thing to remember too is that every time you touch a muscle in the skin, there is the nerves that go to that. And the neuromuscular cleft is where that information is stored, but that's also where ojas, tejas, and prana live. Okay? Now, that means those neuropeptides or hormones, all those things are there. You know, that's the kind of physical, you know, very, very, you know, gross kind of physical component of ojas, tejas, prana. Right?
They live where?
In the neuromuscular cleft. They live everywhere, but there's a concentration in the neuromuscular cleft when the nerve goes to the muscle or fascia or, you know, connective tissue. That's an important juncture. Again, that's the synaptic space. That's the neuromuscular cleft is the mukha of Majidhatu. Okay, so very, very important. So you can see the implications of touch and body and mind therapy, right? You know, that, and touch has a profound impact on our psyche, on our mind, emotions, profound, right? And we know that through, you know, acupuncture, through aromatherapy, through massage, through healing touch, through what all these gamuts of therapies, right? Craniosacral, right? It's demonstrated that, shown that. We've got tons of research on this. It's not very admitted, is it? You know, because people are still looking at massage as just a physical thing. Right? But it's true. We all know that. We just, you know, somehow science hasn't quite shown everything. They're on a good track though, with all the studying of neuropeptides and so on. They're on the good track. They're getting there, and fascial research and all that. Now, marma in Ayurveda, as well as acupuncture, but marma, in especially since it retains the spiritual connotations very well, shows us very much those connections with the mind and body, because a lot of marma points have a direct relationship to manovahashrotas. And if you remember, manovahashrotas, the mukha, the exit, is marma points on the body. So very, very directly to the channels, the nadis and channels of the mind. Let's see. One thing that Dr. Ladd mentions that I think is very, very important is, and this relates now to Panchakarma, let's say with Ayurveda, is why is Abhyanga such a big thing in Ayurveda, right? We know that just the name of Abhyanga, another name for it is Snehana, oleation. Snehana also means, Sneha means love, to love oneself. So this therapy teaches us, if we do it on ourselves or receive it, to love ourselves, to care for ourselves, right? If you don't love yourself, you're not going to go give yourself a massage or touch yourself very much. But by having people learn to give self-massage, it's sometimes the first step to remembering how to love yourself, take care of yourself, right? So that's very, very important there. Now, going on that theme too, in Panchakarma, why the main reason of doing abhyanga, besides getting the herbs into the body, is that by physical touch, by manipulating the muscles and tissues, you are wringing them out of the toxins that are in the deeper tissues, in mamsa, in meda, in maja, right? That are all in there. Because that's what you're touching. You're touching those tissues that contain those deeper tissues within them, right? You're not just touching muscle. You can't touch muscle without touching nervous tissue, without touching fat tissue. You can't do it. It's not physically possible, right? Or for that matter, any tissue at all, right? All the dhatus are accessed by touching. So when you're doing the massage, the oil, the herbs, and your touch, the physical manipulation helps to release, unfold, unlodge ama, mental and emotional ama, as well as physical ama from the tissues. What it does then is it gets it back into the bloodstream, which then is slowly being directed both to our malas, one or more of the ways of elimination for our body. So when we do the quote unquote panchakarma treatments like emesis, purgation, sweating, bloodletting, the toxins, the ama, can be let out through those avenues. That's why you need to do those along with the massage. Otherwise, it goes back into circulation, back into your tissues to a certain extent. Is everybody kind of following me? Massage gets the ama from the deeper tissues back into Bahaya and Abhyantara Margas. If you remember those channels, those from Marma or Medya Marga, like from deeper tissues into circulation and then eventually into the digestive tract for elimination purposes. How many of you felt not so great after a massage? Yeah, and maybe did you also have a bit of ama going on? But then it was, you didn't do anything to eliminate it from the body necessarily, or too much got stirred up. Yeah. So that's why they use it for panchakarma, because it's so effective releasing that stuff. Not only physical ama, but emotional ama. Okay, very, very important. Now the oil is a crucial part of that, as well as the herbs in the oil, because they target and they go deep into the tissues, right? To actually to loosen up that thick congealed ama. They have sharp herbs that go and start breaking that up. Okay. So that's a very important point, and why touch therapy is so important, because it starts melting the unresolved emotions and ama that's in there. So it's dipan pachan for our deep tissues in a lot of way.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So for the abhyanga, then if we're bringing out the toxins when we're doing that or massage, then because I'd read different things where they said, oh, it's fine if you do it before or after a shower, but then is it not helping it if we're not taking a shower afterwards, or it's still okay, doing it after the shower?
Well, abhyanga, no, it's still fine. It's when you're doing self abhyanga and stuff, it's not going to create a huge, like detoxification or so. And the shower is only there to open the pores to help some of the oil go off, and then obviously take it off the outside of your skin. It helps it go inward a little more. It's like a mini Svedana, a very light form of Svedana, sweating therapy. Okay? And just remember, it is only one route of elimination through sweat. You have pooping, you have peeing, you have exhaling, so it's still all there. Yeah. Good. So, under that sphere, again, there's infinite amount of therapies that fall into this sphere, from more grosser therapies to more subtle therapies. How many of you practice some sort of touch therapy, or are interested in practicing that along with that? Yeah, good. What a great coupling with Ayurveda is to do that. Very, very important. And Dr. Ladd speaks about how each therapy kind of has its own proclivity and has particular things to focus on. Marma's lovely, right? That's very directly related. Polarity therapy is great for especially balancing prana and apana. Craniosacral is fantastic for that, and the more subtle levels, working with the pranas and stabilizing prana and kind of bringing in ojas. It very directly works on Majidhatu, for instance.
I've had people cry on my table just from energy work. I mean,
Absolutely.
No touch at all. Just
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So, whether you're doing Reiki or pranic healing or healing touch or just whatever permeation of that, what are you doing essentially, right? You are either like being an open channel for energy to work through you, or you're directing energy, or you're using your energy to, whichever variation of that. But the point is, you're clearing yourself up to then allow prana to come through into the other person. And that prana is intelligent. It knows what to do, right? Like we can direct it, but ultimately it knows more than we do, right? So whether you're doing a directive type distance or non-touch therapy, or if you're doing a totally undirective type therapy, it works, right? It does, because that prana seeks and finds and does the healing that's needed. It's the same. It's really kind of the same thing as if someone you have something that weighing on your heart and you need to express it, and someone just listens and truly gives you 100% of their attention. Your emotions can flow because it's safe environment. It's a nourishing environment, right? So same with these kind of healing techniques. If nothing else, that's going on. They're allowed, the prana is allowing them to unwind in a safe atmosphere, a nourishing atmosphere, right? So wonderful. Yeah, I used to teach Reiki for many years in India and places. That was my first healing modality back, oh God, it's a long time, about 25 years ago. So, but yeah. Okay.
you don't teach that anymore?
No, I have a love for it still. I know it's powerful, but yeah, I don't. It's making quite a comeback these days, I noticed. But yeah, that's lovely. I mean, does it infuse everything I do, even when I'm doing neuromuscular therapy? Sure. No, it's kind of ingrained. Let's go on to Rupa, the color therapy. Okay, Rasa and Gandha I don't have to talk too much about because that's we've already done a lot on that. But Rupa, so chromotherapy, color therapy, sight, eyes, right? The Rupa also means form. So the form things take, right? And then we see them. But color, very importantly, as this. So there's a lot of correspondence with Ayurveda, and first of all, we just acknowledge that we have kind of like the colors of the rainbow. Let's say the kind of spectrum colors that combine to make all infinite amounts of colors. But color is really a reflection of vibration, right? So, and vibration is behind a lot of things. Like how you could correlate it to chakras, you could correlate it to the doshas, you could correlate it to sattva, rajas, and tamas, right? So color therapy is a very effective therapy that acknowledges that the vibrations of different colors will move things in different way. It will affect our doshas, our mind, our chakras, our energetics, our physical body in very, very different ways. Now, there's many ways of using color therapy, right? We can wear clothes of a certain color, and that way we're attracting or repelling certain colors and spectrums of light. We can wear gemstones, which channel that, and planetary energies. We can, or crystals, etc. We can put color on our water bottles and drink the infused colored water. And the color of the plants, the environment, the room, our house, all those things make a difference. Right? So there's an infinite way of using that. Plus color of our food is another way. Visualization of colors, right, in our meditations. And then also beyond just color, using yogic tools like Tratak focusing on a light falls into this, into rupa kind of therapy, as well as yatras, right? Certain symbols that have a different meaning all fall into this. Right? So symbology, symbology is very powerful. Right? Yeah, go ahead, Carla.
And just staring at the ocean can be like a meditation like that, or
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very soothing, right? Well, so for one, our impression of what the ocean is to us, and then another, it is like this blue-green color, right? And very clearly it's reflecting that light, right? So water element, yeah, very beautiful. So very soothing to pitta, right? I find that very true. Like, if I want to soothe my pitta, it's being at the ocean is a great thing for me, right? Or swimming, and that's often kind of a recommendation given for pitta. So, yeah, go ahead.
I find it interesting how colors come and go in the culture. So if you look back to the 80s and the 90s, well, maybe up to the mid 90s, it was really colorful. Like, people wore colorful clothes. If you see, even the titles of the television shows were all colorful and different funny fonts and quirky and fun. And I think people were actually a lot happier then, generally. And then there was this trend where it was like all of these television shows just had almost like this gray monochrome filter put over it. And it was all like washed out and sophisticated and dreary and
black.
Black, and we're still in that. I mean, there's some retro that's come out, like the last. I'm sorry, I did watch the last Thor movie. Actually, I thought it wasn't very good, but they did bring some of this color back.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, like, as a culture, how much this is also affecting us, because we have all of these, different. Sorry, I know.
Yeah. I think you're bringing up a very important point here, because we are affected by that stuff, right? We are affected by that stuff. Like and color is art. It's like a lot of people use that very intentionally for a certain feel. Simply the color. Anybody like Ridley Scott films? You know what I'm talking about? Blade Runner, things like that. A lot of Ridley Scott's films are all gray, black, and green. Just uses those color spectrums, and he doesn't have to do anything. It's just a car pulling in, and it's like ominous, right? It's like it just creates this feeling. It's very powerful and palpable. So a lot of filmmakers, who are real artists, they use color very particularly. And all this is very intentional, advertising and so on. So that's a very important thing. So let's talk about the colors a little. So we could look at Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, for instance. I thought that was fascinating in the book. Dr. Ladd spoke about like white, right, which is kind of like, the kind of reflection of all colors there is Sattva, right? But it's kind of true, right? If you're in white, it has an uplifting but a mellow feeling, right? White is ultimately bright light is white, right? If you look at a ghee lamp, ultimately it turns into like this white, right? So sattvas, and that hence like spiritual traditions, they wear white for like whether it's the priest, the adept, the whichever. Like a lot of, and throughout the world, right? It's a multicultural thing, right? White is pretty predominant. If whether you look at like a Catholic priest, there's going to be white, there's black, but there's also white. Jewish, or if you look at like a Peruvian, if you look at, you name it, Indian, obviously, right? And then Dr. I mentions Rajas is many colors or one color. Just that's in the field of doing things, some kind of action or energy. Whereas Tamas is more that gray, dark, black kind of thing. Right? And that kind of goes back to what Stephanie was talking about, that is, if you look at like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, kind of like, that was a very Rajasic period. And now we're in a much more Tamasic period as a culture, in America anyways, But retro is making a comeback. They're like, okay, enough of this. Let's have some, color in our lives again, right? So that's an interesting correlation. And then there's the correlation of just the colors with whether it be chakras or doshas, right? So for Vata dosha, what are some good colors that'll be soothing to it or balancing, let's say?
Any of the warmer colors, like the orange.
Yeah, yellow, orange, red, right? How about Pitta?
Those are the cool spectrum, like blues, purples.
Yeah, absolutely. Green, green is lovely because it's for both Vata and Pitta, right? And how about for Kapha?
More stimulating colors like red and orange.
Yeah, and more intensive colors, let's say, of those spectrums. Vata, you may want to be a little bit more mellower with it. Like for instance, you see a color of my room here? Uma loves this, and she's a Vata, so it's very balancing for her, But it's like this mellow, warming color, right? As opposed to like bright orange, right? Which would be maybe a little bit more useful for a Kapha person to wear, like a brighter, livelier color, right? So yeah, so that's one use of it. There's many ways you can use colors. One little habit I picked up from Dr. Ladd, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's a male thing, I don't know, but it's like I dress. You ever notice I always have brown or yellow on these Thursday talks, and I always wear a red shirt on the Tuesday talks, almost always. Right? And that's astrological. Means red Tuesdays for Mars, and that's a red planet, and yellow's for Jupiter for Thursday. And so it's something I picked up from him. It makes my clothes selection a lot easier, but I like that. It's appeasing the planets too, so it's a nice way to have that intention.
Would that work with gems then too? Like you could wear, tiger's eye today?
Absolutely, yeah. You could do the same. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it just gives me some direction to dress. I was one of those folks that was dressed by my mom till I was 12 years old or so. So we giggle about that. We have a daughter and a son, so it's like he doesn't care. But our daughter from age 2, she's dressing herself. Absolutely. But our son, whatever, it's like probably till he's 12 or 15, he won't care. Anyhow. Now let's go into the field of rasa. Okay. Well, and before I go on that, how many of you actually use some kind of color to your clients in practice? Yeah, Cindy. So yeah, you got a few. It's a good thing to think about, because it does make a difference. It's like, you may get them at a time that they're thinking about painting their house. You may go and get into town. Clothing's a good one. Gems, I find it's a little difficult unless they're very much into like Vedic astrology or something, because they are costly, right? It's a very costly suggestion. And it's like, yeah, go ahead and get a diamond and a ruby. That's a lot. But clothing is an easy way to go. Right? Or even putting color on water and drinking that. That's a nice, easy way to go. If you have a center like you do in massage sun, you can get a light and kind of create that lighting, and that could be useful too. So rasa, taste therapy. Okay. Now, rasa taste therapy is most obviously dietary therapy and herbal therapy, right? That's what we're kind of talking about here. But I'd like to also bring in that our emotions have a taste. We always have to think about that with the word of rasa. So emotional spheres, influences, and choosing to experience things that have certain tastes. And the most clear would be is like having, if someone is Vata and Pitta deranged, Vata pushing Pitta, then sweet. Now, it may not be the best idea to tell them to go out and have really strong sweets to balance themselves, right? It's not going to work. But, eating more sweeter foods, for instance, but also having sweeter experiences. Choose to have sweeter experiences. If you're going through, a period of a lot of stress and so on, then go choose something like sweet music, sweet friends, like some friends that are just going to love you up and so on. That will be positive and that'll be useful. Right. Now, if someone's overindulged in that, it may be a time to take the bitters, right? A little more, like go on in like a solo retreat or something like that. Go and do something that's a little bit more on that spectrum of flavor, right? So that's one thing, I just wanted to get out of just diet and herbs with that spectrum, because that's normally what it falls into. Now, one thing that's important about rasa, taste, is recognizing with our clients not only maybe what tastes are predominant for them, what they crave, but are they having an excess of certain tastes in their diets, right? Or a deficiency of certain tastes, right? And then, having some recognition too, there's a little tongue diagram that's in the book that shows kind of like which organs are being affected by certain tastes. So this is all useful knowledge to know. But excess and deficiency is a very, very big thing. What are some common tastes that are very deficient in Western culture?
Definitely bitter.
Yeah. I mean, we all probably know a lot of people that haven't had anything bitter for ages, right? And, what are the common excesses in Western culture?
Sweet and salty.
Sweet and salty, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So this is something to be very mindful of and help people to steer. That's why the Ayurvedic concept, like the 6 tastes in your day or meals and so on, are very important, right? There's wisdom to that to help create that balance, and not just everything being sweet, heavy, and salty, right? Because that's going to go in a certain direction, which we see in our society, right? With obesity, overweight, and all this stuff. That's what those tastes do in excess. Right? So everybody kind of clear on that with rasa, right? Now, gandha, 5 sense therapy with smell, I want to first talk about it, linking that with the last one with rasa, because diet and herbs also play with rasa, with our sense of taste. You can't, basically the way that the inner pharmacy or inner digestive system works is, food, we also smell our food as well as taste it to create the right enzymatic reactions and digestive processes. It's a harmony of the sense of taste and smell that creates our appetite, our hunger, our ability to digest. That's all. Those 2 senses work together. That's very important. Is it's easy to think, oh, it's just the taste of food, but how many, we all know, right? Before we taste the food, do you get some effect if you smell some good food? Absolutely. That's the art of cooking, right? It's like waft that nice smell around the house. Everybody gets hungry. Everybody gets interested. Right? If you're in a restaurant, you want to have it to smell good. You don't want to have to smell bad or no smell. You want it to smell good, right? So it's very, very important and to recognize that those 2 senses are combined. Now, sorry. The taste in Ayurveda, smells are also classified by the tastes, right? Sweet, bitter smelling, pungent smelling. Right? And you can see that in a lot of cultures. And that's how aromatherapy, one way of aromatherapy being classified in Ayurveda, is by the taste, essentially. But we're getting those tastes through our nose, right? Because, again, aromatherapy is based on plants, animal substance, all kinds of things like that. And sometimes, if you're an advanced aromatherapist, you know what you're doing, you can imbibe the essential oils. But otherwise, we're using to diffuse and smell. But it's through the same kind of paradigm. So you can use aromatherapy oils, most commonly doshically. You can use them seasonally, to counter whichever effects you're doing it. And then you can use them, of course, one application is on marma points. Right? And marma points, they happen to be convenient because the areas that are most easily be absorbable and appropriately placed for aromatherapy oils that are commonly recommended to put the oils on happen to be marma points on the body. So that's one thing. But in marma therapy, often essential oils are often used, either diluted or straight, to put on that point to create an effect on the marma. That's a kind of interesting thing. You don't see it so much in acupuncture, but you see it in like Ayurvedic touch therapies. So what are some pitta reducing essential oils in general?
Sandalwood,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sweet and astringent.
Yeah, so like rose, right? Rose fits that. And also we have like kus, which actually kind of has a little bitter in it. So yeah, so essentially cooling, sweet kind of essential oils are very, very useful in there. How about for vata?
I think like frankincense, jadamamsi,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the um, some of those the spicy warm ones like cinnamon, but not too much of it.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. That would probably fall much more for kapha. So this is a good thing to think about.
With grounding and heating.
Yeah, you want to start thinking. So look at the gunas, right? So with vata, you want to think now. With pitta, you're thinking cooling, right? Clearly cooling. With vata, you want to think about heating, but not too strong, not too pungent. You need a little, but not too strong, right? The strong ones are more appropriate for what dosha? Kapha, right? Or with ama, right? So kapha, so the heat level, if it's pretty strong, then that works better. Like let's say cinnamon will be a little bit better for kapha, right? But you don't necessarily want to put cinnamon. You got to dilute that down. It's very strong, right? So cloves, cinnamon, those are a little bit better for kapha. But the gently heating ones or neutral ones are very good for vata. But also, there's a huge overlap between essential oils for vata and pitta. Right? Like for instance, lavender is a great one for both of them, but commonly used in vata. It's kind of more neutral as far as cooling. It's a little more cooling, right? But it's not strongly. But it's also sweet, but it has a little bit of an stimulating effect. It's not too strong though. Henna or amber also are good ones for that. Not too heating, right? But grounding. So you want the heavier oils also. More so than with pitta. Pitta you want a little bit, slightly kind of medium heavy, but with vata you can take the heavier oils for grounding effect. Lang lang and stuff like that. Wood oils are good. And then with kapha, henna again can go for both because it's that heating quality. But eucalyptus, right, drying essential oils is great. That's what we want to think about. Calamus, vacha, is another good one. So more like the drying as opposed to the more wet, nourishing, moistening ones, which would be more appropriate for vata. Right? Warming and moistening vata, warming, heating, like hot and dry for kapha. Things like that. Now, there's, not to dilute it because it's a very, literally, and it's a very profound science. You can get a doctorate in aromatherapy. That's it. So there's a tremendous amount of knowledge to go there. But aromatherapy is a great adjunct to working with Ayurveda. One little recommendation I give is one person that does a good job with that is both Ayurveda and with Chinese medicine is David Crow through Floracopia. He gives a course in aromatherapy and Ayurveda and Chinese medicine too. So that's a little lead there.
What was the name again?
David Crow, and it's Floracopia. It's a popular website for that. Yeah, he has courses for that. So let's just talk about quickly about where to put essential oils therapeutically. Okay, where to put them. Some common suggestions are Ayurveda because these relate to marma points that have a propensity for absorbing them. Well, third eye, right? And you see that in India. Like, there's a reason. You notice that people in India have tilak on here. There's a reason because that's a way of absorbing. And they often use sandalwood. The white is the sandalwood paste, and the red is kumkum. So these have different energetics to them. Sandalwood cools that pitta that's there. So third eye, temples, right? There's also arteries there, absorb it. On the ears, right? The carotid and radial pulses on your wrist are great places, and that's a common place where you put essential oils in aromatherapy. Nipples, belly button, okay, nose tip. Right? These are all like areas to anoint yourself. So if you do like in morning, I like to do in the summer, use sandalwood oil and put it here, here, maybe just a touch a little bit here, put it here, here in a radial artery, and then belly button, nipples. And that creates a really good cooling aspect for your body. And those are all like key marma points.
You want to be careful not to put like the stronger oils, like some citrus or the cinnamon type oil, without diluting them, because they could potentially cause rashes on the skin. So
Absolutely. So phototoxic or irritant essential oils, skin irritant ones, you have to dilute. So know your oils before you get them on you. Sandalwood is either diluted usually, or even if you get a pure, if you just do a little bit, it's generally okay. It's not a skin irritant. But yeah, nonetheless, a lot of them are, so you have to know. Now, let's bring together these 5 sense therapies and some suggestions that we can give with people. The most common is meditation, right? In meditation, there's many, meditation has so many different routes and styles. But whether you go the Buddhist route and you do like mindfulness meditation, you can be mindful of sound, taste, smell, right? Like mindful eating is being mindful of the taste and smells of your food. Right? So that incorporates that. Mindful listening. So if you look at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, one is awareness of sound. Other is awareness of body sensations, sparsha, right? Awareness of sight, so using your eyes. And there's tremendous amounts. Then if we go to, let's say, the kind of Indian Hindu kind of perspective, tantric, yantric, all this stuff. So using symbols, using a point, using light like tratak, using whatever, a visualization, an image, a deity, all these things. So rupa, right? So you see that. Sound, meditating on om, right? Shabda. Touching, using different mudras while you're meditating. Right? So you see, in meditation, you can incorporate all these, without using the external substances or other things, you can incorporate that. So I think it's I'm just doing this more of a reminder to myself and to you. It's like, remember, with your clients, you can always access any of these things through meditation or design custom meditations for people. It's a beautiful field to work with. Another element is, for those of you that, if you happen to be more into like Vedic sciences or that kind of tradition, there's puja or worship or ritual. And that really spans beyond, multicultural there. If you look at ritual in all cultures, there's many elements of it. Right? It's not just speaking. Right? There's almost always a speech component to it, whether it's a mantra or it's a prayer or it's certain words, whatever it may be, invocation. Right? That's one thing. There's almost always some form of contact or touch, right? Whether it's like touching yourself in certain areas, right? Or someone else, whatever it may be. And then there's sound, right? There's often musical instruments or songs or things like that. And then there's scent often, right? Certain kind of like incense, whether it's myrrh or sandalwood, copal, whatever it may be, or sage, for instance. Yeah.
Can I share one of my, and I was going to ask this, one of my favorite therapies is Temazcal, sweat lodge. Here in Mexico, It's really common to go into Temazcal. It's very complete because you sweat. Sometimes they give you things like honey or aloe vera to rub in the skin.
There's the sparsha. Yeah.
We chant, and there's also o sea, something burning, like,
So
and
ganda.
herbs.
Mhm.
Herbs, we use fresh herbs and put it on the water.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
And
one
the
of
water element's very clear, so taste, and that's so taste and smell. Yeah, so it's 5 elements. So it's a wonderful way to think about, and this is a good homework actually for y'all, is to think about rituals that you enjoy, that you've been exposed to, and look at them and extract the 5 elements out of them. But I think you're going to find that almost anything that's out there has the 5 elements to greater or lesser extents and emphasis in them. Like in India, for instance, classical Indian puja, pujari rings a bell, right? That's sound. Lights incense or lights like fire or camphor. So that's the fire. That's the rupa. That's an image too. Sparsha does mantras or prayers, right? Rasa has food offerings very clearly, right? And gandha, well, we already talked about incense, right? So they're all there. All those elements are there very clearly and intentionally. Right? So creating a ritual, co-creating a ritual for someone in their daily lives to use these 5 elements is another beautiful thing. I found a lot of great success with clients by kind of co-creating a ritual, letting them kind of lead and then making them aware of the 5 elemental impact. So a lot of tools. And I hope that kind of today, this portion of the talk kind of empowers you to open up your mind to a lot of different ways you can suggest healing in an Ayurvedic venue, right? So we have a few minutes left. I quickly just want to go over the concept of sadvrita. I think it's kind of obvious about how these senses, overuse, underuse, helps in mental health and psychologically, and really Tanmatra Chikitsa is very clearly a mental, emotional health mechanism, right? But just to get to this is, and this is something that I found in like Todd Caldicott's book. It's not the only version of this, but it's a good guidelines, is the idea of sadvrita, or good conduct. It was essentially, if we find good conduct, work with good conduct, then we work with our karmas, not generating, let's say, negative karma, but we also work with non-harming others, generally having better experiences in our future. Right? So in Ayurvedic and kind of the Vedic view, they have a similar thing like the 10 Commandments, right? Whether it be, so it's something from those of us that are brought up in those kind of backgrounds. Whether it's be like Judaic, like Talmud, or or the old Bible, Testament, the 10 Commandments of Moses, all these things. There's often these rules, and it's very much integrated with like the yogic system. You've all probably been exposed to like the yamas and niyamas. Here's the yogic 10 Commandments, right? So let's take a quick look at this, but keep in mind that these aren't just these blind rules to follow. There's so much wisdom of them. It's a way of keeping the world together, function properly, and ultimately moving towards sattvic existence. All right. So in Ayurveda, they like to divide it into 3 groups. There's the kaya karma, so actions of your body. Right. Then there's the mano karma. The vachi karma of speech, actions of speech. And then the mano karma, actions of mind. Okay. So the first in kaya karma, number 1 is himsa. In yoga, we call ahimsa, right? So himsa is violence, not a good idea. So whatever level of violence, and the more conscious and intentional, the more negative that generally is. And unconscious still has some impact, smaller, but nonetheless. So in yoga, ahimsa, so avoiding violence. Next is steya, or asteya yoga, right? So non-stealing. But this, if we look at various things, it's like ultimately it says respecting what others have and not taking. Right? And this can go from like copying other people's work and saying it's your own kind of thing. Right? So giving acknowledgement, giving respect, and sharing that, and honoring. And then ayatha kama. So this is this goes into what kind of in yoga they talk about brahmacharya. Okay? And this is such an interesting one because it's, first of all, the most common way that they speak about this is not doing any kind of like negative sexual actions, like cheating on your partner, things like this, that obviously create disturbance. But what if you further this, what this also speaks about, and as well as brahmacharya, is having a control on your senses. And this directly corresponds to addictive behaviors, let's say. So it doesn't necessarily just mean sexuality, but it speaks about anything that we can get addicted through the five senses, being conscious and aware and working with that. So working with our sense doors and addiction and not doing wrong use or abusing them, etc. Okay? Or overuse, let's say. So that's a very interesting one. I think that's always one to expound upon because, you know, a lot of us, especially in the West, it's like, you know, brahmacharya, you must be celibate. You know, it's like, no. That's, you know, that's not what they even meant with that. You know, because for a householder, that's not appropriate. But honoring if someone is celibate, not to try to sleep with them, kind of thing. You know, that's what they're mentioning here. So, vachi karma of speech, actions of speech to be aware of. So, anrita vachana, vachana means speech. So, anritas means like lying or half-truths or exaggerating or mistruths, things like that. So, being conscious that you're actually speaking truth and informing people, but being skillful with it too is very important, right? Sometimes it's not the time to express what you think is the truth, right? We've all been in those situations. We have to be skillful. That's an important part of this. Sambhima alapa, that means idle speech. Now this is really interesting. Idle speech, this concept that it's not just kind of like talking or gossiping, you know, that's a clear example of this, but just kind of talking when you don't need to. But if you apply it to the modern world, this is a big problem nowadays because there's so much that is out there. If you look at advertising, if you look at just information that's being put out there, much of the modern world, and if you look on the internet, it's all about catching your eye, distracting you, and convincing you of something you really probably don't need. And that's what falls under this, is being very, very important about being clear and not trying to lure someone's attention with something that's not necessary. Right? So respecting each other's consciousness and peace in a way. I found that one to be very kind of enlightening in here. That's a very important aspect. Paishunya.
Sorry, I just want to say, I think that one is so huge. Living outside of North America, I've stopped watching the news, or I watch different news, and I find that when I tune in to news from North America, it's mostly people's opinions. It's not even news. It's people talking about what their opinion is of the news, which is just this, I don't know how to say, but puts ideas in people's heads rather than allowing them to form their own opinions. And to me is like gossip. It's so much gossip. And a lot of people are just not aware of this. But when you remove yourself from the situation and then you go back and look at it, it's so profound to listen to. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I listened to this for so many years.
So I think this is a great topic because a lot of you live in different countries. How many of you notice that there is big differences? And, you know, not that any country is immune from the gossip and all this, but to greater and lesser extents, you can see that. You know, it's like for instance, I go to Europe a lot. My family's are there, and it's and there, you know, you tend to get a little bit more straight news about this happened as opposed to this happened and we are doing this. You know, like it's a little bit more straight news. Not always, you know, by any means. You know, no one's perfect, but it's I see a big difference in that too. You know, just giving the facts, letting you make your own opinions of it, as opposed to well, another level of this too that I think is very important is skewing or only choosing to show certain facts, right? I find, for instance, you know, Europeans are much more aware of what's going on in the world, not just their own country, right? The world and neighbors and all that than, let's say, America is, right? You know, it's like, it'll maybe report something on the back of a newspaper that happened in Europe, but if something happens here, God forbid, you know, it's going to be all over, right? So
And it seems to be mostly negative. It seems like the focus is always on what is bad that's happening.
Yeah. Exactly. So, this Sambhima Alapa is very important these days because we are plugged in. It's hard to go onto the internet or go to another place without being bombarded by lots of things that aren't relevant to what we got there in the first place. Right? So very, very important. Now there's also pashunya, which is like slander. Okay, that's obvious, and parusha, like harsh words or sarcasm too. So like a lot of us sometimes fall into times that we get very angry about something or get like sarcastic or kind of critical, things like that. So being aware of that there's better ways to communicate and use our speech than those ways, and those can have negative effects on people around us. Right? And then there's manokarma of the mind. So vyapada means ill will, kind of harboring ill will about something. So for instance, like an example of my life and living in America, it's very difficult to not, I live in a very liberal place too. So it's like, if the word Trump comes on, it's like this mantra of evil. It's like all this ill will comes to people and so on. And it's like, how much is that going to help, really? Right? As opposed to actually maybe wishing that Mr. Trump makes a good decision or does something well. It's maybe a little more useful than just thinking negatively all the time. It's going to affect me negatively, it's going to affect other people negatively, right? And it's going to perpetuate the ill will that's being perpetuated out there. Just as an example. So seeing other ways of cultivating the mind and being in a mind state instead of rolling in that. Avidya, jealousy, right? So it's a simple, obvious one. And drigviparyaya. So this one's interesting. This is improper interpretation of things. Or like intentionally kind of misunderstanding things. This is more subtle because our mind, if we look at it, it often chooses to interpret information in certain ways. Now, again, through the media, we often get a very big kick. Take it this way, right? But in our own selves, we also have those mental proclivities, those little shades that when we hear something, we tend to push it towards this way, as opposed to seeing it for what it really is. So it's not really that unconscious, like you don't know better, so you're misinterpreting it because you don't know. It's more that and there's something in you that tweaks it towards a certain way. And then maybe you share it with someone with that aspect. And this is kind of what we were sort of talking about with media and with news and all that before. So being wary of that, of actually allowing others to have a free will, make their own judgments, and trying to share things in a more truthful, real to what actually happened fashion as best as we can. Right? So these are some overall good rules of conduct that's put there. And you can see there's that consciousness that's placed in them. So it's not, don't do this, but be aware that this is going on and see, the effects that this causes. So ultimately, self-transformation, altruism, and control of the senses are really kind of key pieces to health of our mind. Right? Watching our sense doors, and we may not all have control of what comes into our sense doors, but we do have to a certain extent. But ultimately after that, we have to surrender, but then also working to not react, working to become present with what really is through meditation, through spiritual practices, so that we can experience things as they are, not through the habitual samskaras, through the habitual reactive type behaviors. And ultimately coming to the truth that being altruistic, helping others no matter what, is always useful, right? And working to transform ourselves, like continuously being open to changing habitual and reactive ways, is a useful tool for us. Okay, so we've completed everything. I went a little bit over, but any last little bit of questions for this?
Was that part in our reading? Because I don't remember.
It isn't.
seeing
No,
Okay.
that's an extra part I added to it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So yeah, and actually one of your post-homework questions is based on that. So good to kind of review that and remember. But I'm asking you kind of, which ones to, which ones you have struggle with or a difficulty with or are constantly being bombarded by. It's good awareness exercise.
Is there any place where we could find that list, or?
I pulled that directly from Todd Caldicott's book. I read
Okay.
medicine, but you can find in a lot of sources. If you just type in Sadvrita, Sadvrtta, then you're going to find it. I believe it's on your objectives for this class, anyways. I put it on there, that word Sadvrita. If you just type that in, you'll probably find in Vedic. So you'll find variations of that. But if you look at it, it's almost identical to all the yoga niyamas.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that these ideas cross cultures. So there's a lot of
very much so.
10 Commandments. And although I remember reading years ago some kind of funny, not a satire, but commentary or criticism of the 10 Commandments, like, why wasn't it more specific? Like, why not say don't rape people? And, like that it wasn't, it doesn't cover enough. But actually, I think if you really read if you read some of these things, don't steal, don't covet, which Jesus said you're not supposed to do that in your mind even. So that's a very yogic thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not coveting, then you wouldn't be raping people, right? So I think that we Westerners tend to kind of think that we need to have this specific rule for specific actions. But if you look at the guidelines that you just said, or the yamas and the niyamas and the 10 Commandments from a spiritual place of how you're being, then it actually all makes sense. Because if you're not coveting things that aren't yours, and that you're being you're honoring not your parents, whether literally or metaphorically, that doesn't mean that you forgive. Well, actually, in Christianity, you do forgive them. Doesn't mean you condone parents that beat you up or whatever, but that you come to peace with it. If you follow all these things, that you're actually going to be a more peaceful person who isn't out there.
And we have to see there's a difference between following, understanding, and really contemplating things. And we need to do that for all these, right? We need to get to the level of contemplating. You could start with following, but it's very important to understand. And then, much more important, to contemplate and really apply and see the truth in them. As we're doing, just see the interconnectivity of it, right? So those are very important aspects. Anyhow, I'm gonna let y'all go. I also want to kind of remember the herbs you signed up for. Please keep doing them. Let's fill up those. I think I assigned everything, last class. So just let's see if we can get them in there. Because next class for herbology, when you come in here, I'm not going to be doing so much teaching. We're going to go over kind of like formula making a little bit and so on. But I want to actually go over some of your monographs and kind of especially formula monographs that I signed for you all too. So if we have them in there, it'll be that much easier to do. You could have instant access to all that. Okay. So I will see you and take care till the next time. Okay. Bye-bye.